When I started doing illustration, I started here in Philadelphia, I'd say about 1958. Here was mainly advertising illustration. And I worked for many of the agencies in Philadelphia for a couple of years. In the 1960s, I started to go to New York with a portfolio and began to do magazine illustration, which I did all through the 60s and the beginning of the 70s while I was doing advertising illustration. And it was fun for a while, but I began to get bored with it because I really always wanted to do children's book illustration, but really didn't know how to get into it. About 1984, I believe, there was a local publisher who had a great success with The Velveteen Rabbit, and Beatrix Potter's Tales of Peter Rabbit had come into the public domain, and so they were anxious to do it. So they asked if I would be interested, and it was one of those moments that really changed my life in illustration. Then Random House saw that book and asked if I would be interested in doing an Aesop's Fables, which I just loved the idea of doing Aesop's Fables, dealing with all those animals, really all those creatures, and bringing them to life and using them as symbols of human behavior was a really great experience. And then while I was working on Aesop's, Random House had somebody start a version of The Wizard of Oz and were not satisfied with it. And so they asked me if I'd be interested in it. And I said no, because I never liked the movie. I thought the movie was kind of hokey. And then I thought, well, I never really read the book. Maybe I should read the book. And of course, when I read the book and I realized that Dorothy was an orphan, and that became the metaphor for me, the key to unlocking, the story, the Yellow Brick Road being the journey for this little girl's self-discovery, got me really excited. Now at this stage, to do Alice, for me, would really be sort of bookends to my career. It would be these two iconic stories about two very independent little girls who found themselves in circumstances that they had to overcome. I also thought that I was very well suited for Alice because I really love caricature, and I do love to draw realistically. And the combination of the real Alice juxtaposed with all these creatures that she has to deal with is something I thought I could maybe add to that story. I tried to stay away from Tenniel's pictures. It's not always really easy to do because they're so iconic. I really love Tenniel's. I didn't think I did when I first saw it many years ago. I always felt really that Alice looked a little stunted, more like a dwarf than a child. And I was surprised to find out really later that that's exactly the way Lewis Carroll thought about it. He was not happy with Alice. He loved the creatures, but he was not happy with Alice. Tenniel's real gifts were really in caricature. That's what he built his career on. The publisher and I were trying to decide if we can do something that could be published in time for the anniversary. Michael Patrick Hearn, who wrote the foreword for the book, suggested that Lewis Carroll had given little Alice the story as a gift, and it was called Alice's Adventures Underground, with no idea about publishing the story. The following year, he decided to publish it, and that's when he called it Alice in Wonderland. So we thought it would be interesting to do the book of drawings as though it were a preliminary book, in much the same way that Lewis Carroll gives the little girl the story as a precursor to what is to follow. In preparation for the show, when we had our first conversations, Denise McGarvey, the curator of the exhibition at Stockton, came down to the studio, and I pulled out lots of the original paintings to show her what I had and what might be possible to be shown in the exhibit. But when she got here, Beside the finished illustrations from other books, I thought it might be a good idea to show her the drawings that I was working on for my current project, which was Alice. And she thought it would be a wonderful idea to show the drawings, to have part of the show and a large part of the show be the drawings, not only the finished drawings, but the preliminary drawings to show the process of how I actually moved toward the finished illustrations. I keep reading the story over and over and over again, and then I start making little doodles, little sketches at the images that will sort of leap out to me. Just like sort of unconscious handwriting. It's almost like you put your hands on a Ouija board and it's sort of taking you. And I'll do that throughout the book. And then I go back and see if I could edit those pictures and see if any are really essential or not essential to the story, because a picture book can't really illustrate everything in a story. It would just become too cumbersome. It would be a tome. And so, since we have to do some editing, I wanted to stay with the situations and circumstances that are absolutely iconic to the story of Alice. I wound up with 41 pictures. And then when I'm satisfied with the doodles, I go back and I start to refine the drawings, bearing in mind all the time the composition of these pictures as you move through the story. Which pictures should be just little vignettes, which pictures should be full page or double page spreads. And this is just the way one interprets the story. The pictures that are most meaningful to me in explaining the circumstances that she happens to be in at that particular moment in the story. That whole section on Alice just really came to life. I was thrilled to see it. And the way the rest of the exhibition at Stockton was set up so that there was a little shelf with a book and then the finished illustrations from each of the books. I just thought that was wonderful. I'd never seen it done before, at least for an exhibition of mine. So I was thrilled. It was a wonderful show. Most students, and I was one, we all thought, what could we possibly have to offer? There's a world of illustration going on out there. It's a parade that's gone by. We're standing on the sidelines. We want to know how to get into the parade. And we think, what could we possibly offer? But the fact is, each individual is a tuning fork that's made really of a material from their own personal experiences. And each one rings differently when you strike it, because the experiences that make that person who they are get them to respond differently from the next person. So if you can just really trust in that, if you can allow yourself to just respond to the material and not worry about a technique, your technique will develop over the years. It'll develop unconsciously the way your handwriting does. Looking back on your handwriting, you notice it has a certain fluidity, a certain style, whatever it is, a certain sort of sketchiness, maybe a quirkiness, but that's part and parcel of your personality. Let that happen. And then whatever you have to contribute will come out if you allow it to come out.